cut it off so that the.
All right. Gotcha. Good evening. My name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi.
I was getting all comfortable there waiting for chapter 5 in the 12 traditions. Then I heard my name. It's like, I want to thank Kent and Debbie. It's always so good to see I have known you guys for like decades. I got here and I did not have all these wrinkles. My sobriety date is January 21st, 1987. I'm from Covina, California. If you don't know where Covina is, if you are downtown Los Angeles and you face your car directly east at midnight and move forward, you will be in Covina in less than 20 minutes at midnight. If it's 3 in the afternoon, 2.5 hours is what it will take. So anyway, I'm an alcoholic, and that's really the most important thing I can tell you about myself, is that I'm an alcoholic. There's a lot of other things that I really care about in this world, things that I have passion for, that I pay a lot of attention to. But there is absolutely nothing that is more important than the fact that I'm an alcoholic. And the reason that I believe I'm an alcoholic is because I've got a really strange relationship with alcohol. That's why I'm an alcoholic. No other reason. And the strange relationship that I have with alcohol takes on a few forms. The first part of this strange relationship that I have with alcohol happens when I drink it. A very strange thing happens when I drink booze. Our book calls it an allergic reaction. And the book says the symptom of this allergic reaction that I get when I drink alcohol is what they refer to as the phenomenon of craving. And the best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls the phenomenon of craving in my life is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more booze I drink, the thirstier I get. It's really strange. It does not happen with anything else that I drink. An example of that is your group was kind enough to give me this bottle of water. And over the next 45 minutes to 6 hours that I'm talking with you, I will, Debbie's not really laughing about that. She's saying, no, you are not, Karl. Right? But over the next 45 minutes that I'm talking with you, I'm probably going to drink half this bottle. I might even finish the whole bottle. But I can absolutely guarantee you that once I finish this bottle of water, I am not going to go get a case of water and lock myself in a motel room. There's no chance of that happening. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, this bizarre physical reaction, this bizarre craving, this bizarre unquenchable thirst, if that was the sum total of my relationship with alcohol, well then, Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism, right? Early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. If that would have worked, I would have. And I imagine you would have gone, oh, no. And just gone on and lived a happy, successful life, just saying no. But you see, I've got this other really strange component of my relationship with alcohol. And what's really strange about this part of my relationship with alcohol is that this happens when I'm not drinking. And if you're new or fairly new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I really want to emphasize this. This deadly part of my relationship with alcohol happens when I'm not drinking. Our book calls it the mental obsession. They also refer to it as the strange mental blank spot, and they drive it even further home when they call it the thought process that precedes the first drink. The best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls the mental obsession in my life is that it seems like no matter how much pain and suffering my last drunk caused, I seem to have a mind that will always paint a picture that makes it okay for me to take another drink. I seem to have a mind that will rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. So therefore, because of these two components of my relationship with alcohol, number one, I cannot drink successfully because this strange craving, this loss of control. So I can't drink successfully. But at the very same time, because of this thing called the mental obsession, I cannot not drink successfully. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. It's the ultimate catch-22 we call alcoholism. I'm going to harp on that physical feature just a little bit more because it's the one thing, bar none, we all have in common. Because the truth is, if you're new or fairly new and they've said, wait till you hear your story or listen for the similarities rather than the differences, I know what they mean. But sometimes it's pretty hard because you know what? We are really quite different. We really are. Our stories are very, very different. And why? Number one, because Alcoholics Anonymous is a wide cross section of society. Every single race, creed, color, religion, every single social and economic background, every single culture, we're all here. Right? We're such a wide, diverse group of people in AA that right here in this room tonight, we probably have a bank president, a bank teller, and a bank robber, all right here tonight. And I can pick out the bank robbers right now. On top of that, we drink differently than each other. We really do. If you listen closely in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, when people tell their stories, we also drink differently than each other. And to illustrate that, let's imagine this. If you're new or fairly new, this would never happen in a meeting, so don't panic or don't get excited one way or the other, because it's not going to happen. But just, but imagine right from the back door, right down the aisle here, we wheeled in this giant cart right down here. And on that cart, we had all the kinds of booze we all love, right? If you're an expensive top shelf drinker, we got it. Remy Martin, Covina CA, we got it. If you're a bottom shelf drinker, we got that too. Mad Dog 2020 and everything in between. And if we all took a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks, real drinks, no umbrellas in there, no mixer, good. If we all took 4 or 5 stiff drinks, we'd all be acting very, very differently, right? Over in this corner, we'd have the good time crowd. Fun, 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 drink, 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 talk, 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 woo, party, 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 drink, 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 talk, 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 add a little methamphetamine, talk a little faster, talk, 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 right? But this is the good time corner. They are having a good time, right? Over in that corner, we'd have the criers, them, they get a little drunk, like, oh. Over in that corner, we'd have the fighters, them, right? Over in this corner, a bunch of us would be naked. I personally would be visiting the other 3 corners, trying to find a couple of friends to come over here with me. Just the way I get. So our stories are very different based upon which corner we're drinking in. Right? If you're in the good time corner, get a lot of DUIs, right? Got to get to the next bar. It's always at the next bar, right? After hours, where we're going? Hey, we're going over to Kent's house. Let's go, right? We're out on the road. We get arrested. We got a lot of court dates. We got lawyers. We got bail, all of it, right? But if we're in the crying corner, they never get arrested. They don't even leave the house, right? First thing they do, they call you at 3 a.m. Right? So our stories are very different based upon which corner we're drinking in. But no matter which corner we're in, there's one thing we would all be doing. We would all be back at that cart for another drink. That was really important for me to understand when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they said, listen for the similarities rather than the differences. I also seem to have a strange spiritual relationship with alcohol. And I didn't really understand this for quite a few years in AA. And I'm not even sure they really even talk much about that in the book a little bit. But it's not as clear as the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind, the mental and physical abnormality in my relationship with alcohol. But I also seem to have an abnormal spiritual relationship with alcohol. This spirit, this thing that makes me, this thing that's trying to communicate with you right now, this part of the human being that poets and philosophers, musicians and theologians have all tried to describe or to bring forth, that part of me seems to react differently to alcohol also. And the best way that I can really describe what I mean by that is just to skip ahead in my sobriety. Later in my story, when I was already 13 years sober, it was the year 2000. And my mother called me up, and Alcoholics Anonymous had completely worked in my life. Everything that is supposed to happen in a guy's life by 13 years had happened. Family had been restored, all that type of stuff. So my mother calls me up and says, hey, Carl, your brother and his wife and kids are spending the summer in the south of France. They sent me an email and invited you and I to come out. There's a whole wing of the house that they have. If you're wondering how somebody affords a giant house like that in the south of France for the summer, my brother and his wife are the first 300 employees of Microsoft. No resentment from me. I've done the work. I can live with the fact that, right, he hasn't worked since he was 35. Right? I'm fine with it. But anyway, right? So my mom tells me, I go, hey, absolutely, let's do it. And she said, well, hey, Since we're going over anyway, let's go over to Iceland and we'll see the family farm. We'll see this museum dedicated to your great aunt. And I go, this is sounding better by the minute. And indeed, we went to Iceland for 9 days, had a spectacular time. As a result of that trip in 2000, I've actually been back to Iceland about 8 or 9 times since then, but that's beside the point. The point of the story happens in the south of France. And so about the 3rd day in there, my brother goes, hey, Karl, since you don't drink, I'm going to ask you to drive. But Mary Lou and I have found this amazing Michelin-rated restaurant, and we want to go have this 13-course French meal. And they'll probably be serving wine, so Karl, you drive. And I said, I will be fine with driving if you will be paying, because that sounds really expensive. And indeed, so we take off. They had the nannies watch the kids. I drove, my mother, my brother, and his wife. Off we go 5 kilometers down from where we're at. And indeed, we pull up this 1,000-year-old castle. And the whole lower level is this amazing restaurant. And we embark upon a 13-course French meal. Now, I had never had a 13-course French meal before. And if you've never had a 13-course French meal, what they do is they bring you a tiny little bit of food 13 times. That's what they do. They bring you a tiny little bit of food 13 times. And with each one of these tiny little bits of food, they will bring a really ridiculously small, embarrassingly small little glass of wine. And the waiter will tell a story as to why this particular wine was paired with that particular food. They will then tell a story about what vineyard this wine came from and what region of France this vineyard is in and what family has historically owned that region of France. So it's all very interesting, wonderful stuff. And my brother and his wife recognize a good drinking opportunity, and they are like, hee, ha, ha, ha. And I try this. Say, why would it? Hey, maybe we should pair that with this. Hey, where was that vineyard again? Maybe we'll go wine tasting there next week. And so they're having a blast. And me, I'm 13 years sober, so I am trying all the Diet Cokes of the region. I kept on asking the waiter to tell a story to make me feel part of. He seemed to get embarrassed for me. Oh, no. But my mother is like this professional non-drinker. She will accept your offer of the drink, but she will just barely put it to her lips, just sort of nonchalantly, and set it down. And maybe 6 minutes later, she will barely let it touch her lips again, and she'll set it down. But it never goes anywhere, right? And I've witnessed her doing this my whole life. And, but this time, because all these glasses were stacking up in front of her, she told the waiter, hey, why don't you clear these out in front of me and don't bring me anymore? And I said, Mom, come on, I'm driving. Why don't you have some? Have more. And she goes, no, I don't like the way it makes me feel. Now, I've probably heard her say that many times before in my life. But for whatever reason, on this particular night, I decided to ask the $1 million question. I said, Mom, can you tell me, how does alcohol make you feel? And what she said knocked me right out of my chair. She said, well, Karl, I'm here having a once-in-a-lifetime experience, sitting here in this courtyard, looking at the colors of the French countryside at sunset. And Karl, those colors are just magnificent. And Karl, I'm listening to the string quartet here. And the music that they're playing I'm awash with memories of my life at different periods of my life, and I'm just loving it. And Karl, I'm sitting here speaking with 3 of the people I love the most in the world. And Karl, if I were to drink a little bit too much alcohol, the colors would start to get dull and blurry. The music would start to sound shallow and off in the distance. And I would have a really hard time keeping a conversation going with you. Do you get that? That is fundamentally the opposite relationship to alcohol than I have. Because what she's saying of and by herself, her spirit can see the colors of life, can hear the music of life, and her spirit can connect with God's other kids. And if she adds a little bit too much alcohol, it gets dull, blurry, and sloppy. You see, me, of and by myself, I cannot see the colors. I cannot hear the music, and you are goddamn boring. You give me 4 or 5 drinks, and look at the colors. The tapestry of God's handiwork is truly amazing. Do you hear that music? I will tell you where that cello was made, whether I know or not. I can make up the name of a German village on the spot. And you become very interesting, but not as interesting as me. And when I realized that sitting there that day, I went, oh my, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me. And I didn't even know it. They awakened my spirit to life without a drink. They brought the colors, the music, and the connection to God's other kids into my life. And I truly believe that's what they mean by a spiritual awakening. Right? Because if I would have had to have stayed in the dark, ugly, you see, I knew what sobriety was before. This is what sobriety was before I got here. Hey, Carl, why aren't you drinking? I can't. I got arrested again. They're on me. I got court cases. They're breathing down my neck. I can't. That's what sobriety was. Right? And yet you guys delivered this without me even knowing it. You just said, show up at meetings, get a commitment, get a sponsor, work steps, learn to work with others, whether you think you know what you're doing or not, especially if you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Give it a try. You can't break them any more than they're broken already. So I arrived at Alcoholics Anonymous literally in handcuffs. I was in the military. I would love to tell you that I was in the military because I wanted to serve my country, get an education, and see the world. What happened was I'd flunked out of college. I'd spent 3.5 years on my parents' money at Washington State University, and I'd gotten about 10 credits. And at any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content. Then you add this with a drug deal went horrifically bad. And so I joined the Navy. And what I'm about to tell you should concern you, but on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test called the ASVAB test. And this test that I took qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should concern you that the United States Navy would have any type of system in place that even maybe possibly or even remotely would allow somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp, and I could not pass that particular test. That test is called a urinalysis test, is what they call that. And by that time of joining the Navy, I had already been, I had qualified for Alcoholics Anonymous 10 years before that. I was 23 years old. I'd started drinking rather late in life. I started at 11, right? And I was the textbook outline of a teenage alcoholic. My parents had constantly tried to intervene in my life. They would send me to well-meaning, highly educated psychiatrists, psychologists. All these well-meaning people would look at me and, some other tragedy, a wrecked car, flunking out, getting arrested. Now they've taken alcohol away from me. They put me in front of well-meaning, highly educated people who would have some sort of report in front of them. They'd look at me and say, "What's the matter with you? Why do you do this?" If I would have had the vocabulary that you guys have given me here in Alcoholics Anonymous in the last 38 years, I would have responded throughout my teenage and early 20 in my years before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, when I'd be on these one-on-one appointments with these people. I would have responded to these well-meaning people with something like this. I would have said, "I see that you're shocked by my drinking. I am too sometimes. I agree." Then I would have followed it up with this. "But if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I drink. There's only one thing worse than the price I pay for my drinking, and that's the way that I feel when I'm not drinking. Because when I'm not drinking, restlessness, irritability, and discontentment is an understatement. I literally feel like I'm going to implode from the inside out." The best way I've ever heard it described was by an old timer named Covina S when I got here. They used to say, I felt like a scream looking for a mouth. And that's the way I always felt when I didn't have alcohol. And yet you guys constantly trying to take alcohol away from me, right? And I'm just like, no, it's the only thing that makes sense. I know it looks bad right now, right? But man, you can't. So anyway, the Navy had salted my tail after I'd been in the Navy for 2 years. I just had this kind of an ugly morning. I was drunk, racing my car back to the base. I was already in a lot of trouble, and I lost control of my car right in front of the guard shack. I lost control at 40 miles an hour, and this Marine had to do this big dive out of the guard shack, And I'm so grateful they're in like tip-top physical shape. I mean, this guy did a quick dive out of there and did a quick somersault, back up, weapon drawn. And I really hated mornings like this. God, I hated mornings like this. Sirens going off, you know, people screaming and yelling, people running in different directions. They're all pointing at me like this is all my fault. And I was climbing out of the wrecked car feeling like I got questions too as to what happened here. I hated mornings like that. Stage 2 of mornings that I hated. About an hour later, I find myself in a hospital bed and I'm handcuffed to the hospital bed. This was not the only time in my life that had happened. That means that I'm in medical trouble and legal trouble, right? At the same time. That particular morning, the Navy doctors, my Navy superiors were reading new charges on me. This is nothing significant. Like I said, that's just what happens in a guy's life like mine, about every 90 days if you're living the way I'm living. But the most significant thing that happened that morning is the Navy doctors prescribed this stuff called antabuse for me. I was now under orders to show up at sick bay every single morning before quarters. I'd have to sit in that chair. I'd have to sit there with my hands on the side and stick my tongue out. And that hospital coroner would take this little white pill and put it right on my tongue and sit there and watch me for a half an hour to make sure the antabuse actually got in my system. I lasted about 10 days on that antabuse and I went AWOL from my ship, locked myself in a little hotel room in downtown San Diego. Plaza Hotel, 4th and Broadway. It was $13 a night back in 1986, fine establishment. If you go there, it's still there. Check the Yelp reviews before you go. But I remember sitting on the edge of the bed and I had a bottle of vodka and a shot glass sitting in front of me. And as I stared at the bottle of vodka, I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of antabuse when they prescribed it for me that day. They had said, son, you need to understand this, that if you drink while you are still on this antabuse, you will get one of 2 reactions. One reaction is you will get violently ill. The other reaction, son, and you need to hear me, you might die. You might have full organ shutdown if you drink on top of antabuse. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, recalling these instructions. And as I looked at the bottle, I thought, well, I wonder which reaction I'm going to get. And I took one shot and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again, as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure. And I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face. So I looked in this cracked little mirror that was in this hotel room and I was red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I could feel my heart going. Looked at my shirt. I was drenched in sweat. And all of a sudden, I was like, hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. There's something wrong with you guys if you think this is funny. So I took another shot and up it came. My second sponsor was a man named Eddie Cochran. Debbie remembers him. His sobriety date was December 2nd, 1951. One of the pioneers of Southern California Alcoholics Anonymous, along with some that we just lost. He used to call what happened to me projectile regurgitation. This is a new level of puking I am unfamiliar with, right? Because we all know normal puking is one of the tools for living we get out there. We all know how to be in the middle of a good drunk and we just get that little warning, right? Little sour taste in the back of the throat. You're just going to go, we're just right back into the conversation, right? It's not the end of the night, for God's sake. But here on the antabuse, there's like this Linda Blair spray across the room. Thank God the Plaza Hotel is the type of hotel room where the toilet is in the same room with the bed. It's a design feature, I believe, maybe to make convicts feel more at home upon release. I'm not really sure. But I found the magic of drinking on top of antabuse, and that is hang in there. And that's a very important aspect. If you're going to drink on top of antabuse, you cannot half measure it. In fact, if you're going to try drinking on top of antabuse, you may need to reach down deep inside yourself for a level of commitment you might not even know you had. But I found that if I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and keep puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the antabuse would kick out of my system and I quit throwing up and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating and sweating, and I'm all right with that. So I drank on top of antabuse the last 7 months of my drinking. The only words to describe this are desperation drinking. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in a pool of blood in a motel parking lot in San Diego, and I came to on an operating table. They had to do reconstructive surgery on my face. My last night of drinking, I'm being led out of the San Diego jail, being transferred from civilian authorities back to military authorities. The handcuffs were extra tight that morning. You know how they do that sometimes. And my neck muscle was not working well. And after, being in this office and that office and in this van and over here, and then they finally got back to the base and tried to deliver me back to my ship. And that morning, the officer deck put his arm up and said, wrong answer. Not allowed to cross the quarterdeck. Orders have already been processed on this loser. The orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, and then he got this sort of sour look on his face, or it says here he can go to treatment. Now, when they said that word treatment, I went, Now, it wasn't because I thought treatment is a good idea. The only reason I reacted that way to the treatment is that sounded like something that might help me with the inevitable court dates that were coming, right? Now, as you can tell, I'm not so bright. I was 25 years old. I'm not doing well in this world, but I did know the following. Whenever I was in handcuffs, shortly thereafter, I will be seeing a judge, right? I did know that. And I now know it wouldn't have mattered what I was thinking or feeling or what my choice would have been that morning because I was in handcuffs. And I don't know about your experience in handcuffs, but mine was always the same. Whoever had me in handcuffs, never once did they ever turn to me and say, so what's your opinion on what we're going to do next? Right? When you're in handcuffs, you go where they say. And they took me up to a military treatment center. And when the doors are locked behind me, that's when the handcuffs were taken off. And as far as I'm concerned, the United States Navy had one of the finest treatment centers in the world back in the 80s and 90s. But that's not the point. That's not what I remember. What I remember is 4 to 5 nights a week. And this is the most spectacular part of that treatment center. 4 to 5 nights a week, white vans would pull up to those barracks. 6 or 7 of us would be put into each one of those vans. Those vans would leave the Navy base and go out in town, and we would be brought to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we would sit along the back, and we got to watch Alcoholics Anonymous. I am so very grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous allows outside agencies to refer potential alcoholics to open meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. They allow them to come and watch Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not know that there was a huge difference between watching Alcoholics Anonymous and actually doing Alcoholics Anonymous. But just by watching Alcoholics Anonymous, a couple of things really struck me over those couple of weeks as I was in my first impression of AA. The first thing that I noticed, sitting there in the back, was that, okay, once again, I'm in a situation where alcohol has been taken away from me, not the first time. And whereas before, when alcohol had been taken away from me, I was always put into these one-on-one appointments with highly educated, well-meaning people that wanted to talk to me about me. But this time, alcohol has been taken away from me. I was not put in front of these people that wanted to talk to me about me. I was put in front of you guys. And you guys did not want to talk to me about me at all. You guys seemed to only want to talk about yourselves. That's all you did. You would go on and on and on about yourselves, like I'm doing tonight, right? When Kent called me and said, hey, Carl, do you want to come up to Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill, or wherever we are, and talk about yourself for an hour? I said, yes. Yes, I do. If you're new or fairly new and getting called on in a meeting terrifies you, I get it. I get it. I still get nervous when I'm asked to do it. No doubt about it. And why? Because we all judge each other. I guarantee you at dinner, you guys will be discussing what you agree with and disagree with about what I just said tonight all the time. We all do it. We get it. I get it. I get it. So here's the trick. If you get nervous about doing this, go practice telling your story in the mental institution. That's where you should go practice telling your story. Why? Because they don't judge you in the mental institution at all. They don't. And while you're practicing your story there, if some guy on the couch at a certain point of your story goes, oh, that was great, save that piece of your story. Because if they like it in the mental institution, we're going to love it here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. It's called H&I. It's one of the most valuable things you can do in early sobriety is go tell your story in places where people can't get out. Because they're just grateful you're there. Right? So that's the first thing that I noticed. The other thing that I noticed is you guys were happy and joyful and comfortable being sober. Like I told you, I knew what sobriety was. That's what sobriety, but you guys seem to like wear it loosely. You celebrated it. You were excited about yourself being sober, and you would lose your mind over your friend's sobriety, right? You got even more excited about your friend getting 90 days, right? It really struck me. It really struck me when I was new. So after 45 days, they let me out of that military treatment center. That's what the orders were. And my car had been in an impound lot that 45 days. And I remember leaving the base up in the north end of San Diego, up in the Miramar Naval Air Station. That's actually where the Top Gun pilot school was. Our treatment center was there. And so our little section was called Top Drunk. That's what they called us. And I remember leaving, I was pulling off that base, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I had my orders in my hand. And I didn't realize how crazy it was until years later when I looked back at it. My orders in my hand said, I did not need to be back to my ship till Monday. Now think about this. Let's send him to treatment on taxpayer money and give him the weekend off when he gets out. I don't know what Navy clerk did that, but I got to tell you, I had one of the most valuable experiences because of that. If we would have read chapter 5 tonight, we would have heard we stood at the turning point. And I got to tell you, my 38 years, I have stood at the turning point again and again and again, in many different conditions, under many different situations. But the very first time I stood at the turning point sober was pulling off that base Friday afternoon, 45 days, fresh out of treatment. And I had this choice. If I took a right, I could head right down the 15 and the 163 freeway, right to downtown San Diego, drop right back to the Plaza Hotel and pick up right where I left off. But this other voice said, Karl, if you turn left, you know where that meeting hall is. They took you there twice in the last 45 days, and you remember where that's at because it's right near a bar you used to like to drink at. And when people were talking in that meeting hall, they talked like there's lots of meetings in the same address. People would say, I was at the morning meeting earlier. They were talking about the noon meeting. So if I just go to that address, maybe I'll be safe, right? And literally our life sometimes hangs in the balance as that moment. Do I turn right or do I turn left? And I turned left, and I showed up at the North Shore Alano Club in Pacific Beach, 6 p.m. gong show meeting. And I'm sitting in the back, and one guy that night before the meeting, operating on his primary purpose, came barreling across the meeting when he saw me and said, rather aggressive, never seen you here before. What are you doing? And he like startled me so much, I accidentally told him the truth. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I just got out of a Navy treatment center about 45 minutes ago. I don't know what I'm doing. His eyes went, big smile went across his face. He looked like he had just hit the jackpot in Las Vegas. See, I didn't know I just established myself as the holy grail of Alcoholics Anonymous, a newcomer who accidentally admits he does not know what he's doing. We are hunting for you. We are looking for you all the time. And so he's fighting his friends at the break. He's mine. I got him first. He's mine. But there was something else going on in this guy's life that particular Friday night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. So he's wondering what he was going to do with his weekend: homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this guy was insane over this woman the whole weekend. In between the barrage of meetings he took me to, in between each meeting, he'd throw me in the passenger side of his car. He'd start driving and he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of these AA radar cards that has made it to the next meeting, I guess. And he'd be yelling at me, you got to go to meetings, you got to read the book, you got to get sponsored. Damn her! You got to go to meetings, you got to read the book. Damn it! Now, I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that that guy that night in his pain was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, who had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore he understood that the solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. After that weekend, I got back to my ship, and the one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous was waiting for me. His name was Bob W. He was 23 years old. He had 14 months of sobriety. He was very proud of his name, too, Bob W. He would say, my name is like the hybrid of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. If there was such a thing as a rolling eye emoji, I would have been flashing that all over the place. Come on. But I got to tell you, and his sponsor had been hounding him for months that he needed to start working with others. Right. But he was kind of worried on the ship and, but so I was me coming back from that treatment. I'm like gold being delivered to him on a silver platter. He was going to work with me whether I wanted him to or not. I would have had to jump overboard to get away from him. I spent my first 2 years of sobriety on that ship traveling the world with Bob. And whenever that ship would pull into a port, we would go find you guys. And there was no social media. There was no email. There was no, Facebook pages nowhere. Hey, I've got a friend coming to Asia. We had to get off that ship, find a payphone. We'd have to call. Maybe we get a live person. Maybe we get a recording with an address. We'd have to pull out a map, a real map, and we'd follow that map. And you guys were always there. Whether there was 2 of you or 200 of you, you guys were always there. And then Bob's sponsor back in port had told him he had to, when the ship was out at sea, because we'd be out at sea for 2 and 3 weeks at a time. He was given instructions that we had to meet and read the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous every single night. So every night at 6:30 p.m. when that ship was out at sea, Bob and I would meet down in engine room number 2, down in this little battery shop. And we would read the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous back and forth. And I got to tell you, remember, I'm the first one he worked with. He did not know what he was doing. I certainly did not know what we were doing. And in looking back at those 2 young men out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, down in that little battery shop, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form. The blind leading the blind, right? But what's supposed to happen happened for both of us. A fundamental rearrangement of our attitudes and ideas towards life took hold at some point during that 2 years. And you guys are going to be celebrating birthdays, I think, later tonight. And then you guys are probably going to sing. I hope you sing well. Most AA groups don't. But everybody sort of in California get excited and your friends show up and your friends are there. I mean, maybe you go to dinner afterwards. It's a big deal when you take a cake. My 1 year, January 21st, 1988, happened in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And Bob went up to the mess deck and stole a stale piece of cornbread. And there were no candles on the ship. And so he got a wood match and flicked it and put it on there. And he sang very badly, "Happy birthday to me." And I went, and then Bob said, "Would you like to share?" I mean, it was as lame as I just described it. I mean, just as lame as could be. But I got to tell you that later that night, laying in my rack in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I had a spiritual experience, one of many that added up to the spiritual awakening that I described earlier. But that experience in the middle of the night, as I laid there and I thought, I don't even know what's real or not real in my life. In this last year, I have not cleaned up. I mean, I've got court cases with both civilian and military stuff still going on. I am still on serious probation. My family's barely talking to me. There's this other embezzlement scam that I was trying to clean up, but I didn't bring it up. It's a whole 8-step workshop I can do on that one. And I mean, I didn't know what was real or not real or what I was going to, anything. But the thing I did know is I had 1 year. You could have put me on a lie detector test and said, "Do you have 1 year?" And I say, "Yes." See, if you would have said, "Hey, is this going to happen? Does that happen? Is that really real or not?" Right. But that was so important that I knew I had 1 year. And the other thing that I remember thinking is maybe, just maybe, I can get a life like I hear those people when we are in port and I'm at those meetings and people talk about having a life of meaning, purpose, and community. Maybe I can have that. 2 years sober, I got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. That's the result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and apparently merciful God, and a Navy clerk that lost half my file. That's how that happened. One of the amends I was unable to make while I was still in the Navy was that my parents had paid for a bachelor's degree back when I was 17, 18, 19, and 20. They'd wasted thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for a bachelor's degree, and I did not have one. And my first sponsor, Bob, like I said, did not know what he was doing, but the grand sponsor got involved. It's never good news when the grand sponsor gets involved in these decisions. And I was told that I either had to pay my parents back every single nickel they had wasted on that, or I had to go get what they paid for in the first place. I randomly chose this university near this town called Covina. And when I got close to Covina, I pulled over to a payphone and I looked up, called central office, asked where there was a meeting, and it pulled me into this place called the San Gabriel Valley Alano Club. We affectionately call it the 502 Club, and we more affectionately or very humbly call it the sobriety capital of the world. And my intentions were to just go get that degree, because it's in telecommunications management and computer science. Just go get that degree and then go back to Seattle and use all of my family contacts in the tech world. That's what my plan was. But what I didn't really realize is that there was something seriously missing in my program, and that is a home group. Not any fault of, it's just the nature of where I was, right? I was a nomad in Alcoholics Anonymous traveling the world, but I was able to stay sober because that's what I had. And if you want to call the home group of Bob and I, great, right? But I didn't realize that I really needed to be accountable to a community. And in doing that, I was going to grow up something. I mean, really, I was really going to grow up by becoming accountable to a community. And I've been meaning to leave Covina. It's now 36 years later. I'm trying to get out, but so much stuff has happened. And you know what actually happened? Everything I dreamed in that rack that night on my 1 year, a life of meaning, purpose, and community. Thank you very much.